Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me again in this third episode. So last time I covered a little bit around what it's like moving from a corporate job to all of a sudden working for yourself and what that looks like in terms of structure, in terms of your day. I also looked at 5 key tips for how to stay productive when all of a sudden accountability is you. And that was really what I discussed in that episode. But today, I'm going to be covering a bit of a different topic. I want to be talking to you about working overseas. And a big part of me taking the career decision to take a sabbatical was really to give me the opportunity to work overseas. But that's not the only way you can work overseas. And in this episode, I want to talk to you around the 3 main routes to working abroad and how you can go about it. I do want to say though, as a little bit of a disclaimer, that I'm not going to be covering tax implications or legal implications or anything to do with specific countries and visa requirements. So please do your due diligence if you are looking to go abroad, but hopefully this video is a great starting point to think about what you need to do next and think about some of those considerations that you may need to make. So why work from anywhere? Why even go abroad in the first place? I think the pandemic, and I spoke about this in my first episode, I think the pandemic really shifted what we knew previously and what is now possible. For me, the decision was, I knew I wanted to get out of London for a bit, but I also knew I didn't just want to go traveling. I still wanted to work, I still wanted to progress in some way with my career, but I wanted to not necessarily be based in one particular place. And just the opportunity to take your laptop and go work abroad sometimes, I think is a very freeing, a very liberating feeling, particularly if you don't have a lot of responsibilities that are keeping you to one place. And I think the pandemic really opened up the door to this opportunity. Would it have come round otherwise? I don't know, but certainly it showed us that, hey, if we couldn't have our laptops at home and just be working at home, why can't we be working on the Amalfi Coast doing it? But it's obviously not that simple, and it definitely takes research, it takes time to understand what is the best option for you. So I'm going to talk to you about the 3 main ways to go about working abroad. The first way is to talk to your current employer. So talk to them and find out what policy is in place for working abroad. For me, in my case, there was a policy, but it was slightly restrictive in that you could work abroad for 10 days if you had dual citizenship in that country. But other companies are more flexible. Some companies, I know one friend of mine, his company allows him to work abroad for up to 30 days a year. So that's pretty cool. So just go firstly, do your research and find out what is possible. Does the company have a policy? What does that policy look like? I will say it really depends on the business and the industry that you're in. And I'm not going to go into all the legal aspects of it, but say you're working for quite a strict law firm or audit firm, they may have different restrictions in place compared to if you're working for a very early stage startup in the beauty industry. For example, very much depends on how the organization is set up and how they've gone about the tax and legal rules. But go look at the policy, ask the question. And another option that's definitely worth considering is if you are working for a global company, then you might think about transferring to another member firm. So staying with your company, but just basically moving office. That is something that I looked at. I definitely looked at 2 options. But for me, part of this sabbatical was also about being able to do some of my own projects, so it wouldn't have met that need. But if I wanted to stay in my consulting role, then definitely I would have simply transferred to another country within the same organization. Okay, so the second option for working abroad is to look at remote jobs. So there are a lot of standard jobs out there that allow you to work remotely. Some platforms that you can use are We Work Remotely, that's the first one, and Truly Remote. So these are platforms specifically advertising jobs that allow you to work from anywhere. You can also now filter on LinkedIn and filter on remote within a particular region. Often, there are some jobs and companies that are literally work from anywhere and global, but often there's a little bit of a time zone restriction. So you may see roles that are advertised which say remote, bracket North America's only, or remote, bracket Europe only. I think this is still great. It gives you freedom to not be restricted to one office in one country, but you just have to be aware that there is a little bit of the time zone, or that you may be constricted to a particular region. So that's something to consider. And really, otherwise, when you're applying for a remote work from anywhere role or work from a specific region role, I don't think the application is actually that much different to if you're applying for a standard job. Probably don't lead when they ask you, so why do you want this role? Probably don't lead with that as your main reason, but definitely it's a great option to look at, and more companies are now advertising themselves as remote first. There's also a lot of early stage startups that are just looking to save office space, and all of their workforce are working remotely and not necessarily in the same country. So do your research. The third option is to consider the digital nomad route, or the freelancing and contracting route. And I think this is one of the most freeing of the options, but also it's one of the hardest to do. The digital nomad trend has absolutely boomed in the last few years. You just have to look at platforms such as Fiverr or Upwork, not WeWork, Upwork, and they have a whole range of opportunities and contracts and jobs that you can go for. However, a slight word of warning is that sometimes, almost like the first option when you're working for a company and you have to go and check the company policy, if you are a contractor or a freelancer and you sign an agreement with the firm that is basically paying you, just check the agreement and make sure that there's no restrictions on where you can work, because that's going to be really, really critical to taking the job. And I would also say that with the digital nomad or contracting route, unlike with option 1 and 2, where you are set within a company and you have a permanent contract in place, this one you are a little bit more free. But the downside of that is you don't have a permanent contract in place, so you are not officially employed by one employer. And that comes with upsides, it also comes with downsides. So again, do your research. If you're wanting the flexibility and you feel that you don't necessarily need the security of being with one employer, then it's a great option, but it is a harder option and it is a riskier option, but it's also, I think, the most freeing option, because you really can roam around and go really where you want, depending on the jobs that you're taking and depending on the type of activities, business activities that you are doing. So those are the 3 options in terms of wanting to work abroad. Number 1, stay with your company and check the company policy or move to another member firm. Number 2, get a remote work from anywhere role and go out and search for roles that allow you to work abroad, maybe in a particular region or maybe anywhere in the world. Number 3, become a digital nomad, contract, and basically set yourself up to be able to work where you want and take jobs, but do check the jobs that you're taking. What are the considerations though for all of those? What are some of the considerations if you're thinking about moving abroad? Well, firstly, where do you want to go? What are you looking for in a new country? Bali versus Barcelona are going to have a very different feel, a very different culture, a very different environment. Compare that to New York. So really think about, what are you after? You may want to move abroad, but what exactly are you looking for when you move abroad? Because that will determine the type of countries to go for. The second consideration is, are you moving on your own, as is in my case, which is pretty scary, also pretty cool, but pretty scary? Or are you moving with a partner or your family or friends? And that will, particularly if you're moving with a family, obviously you need to consider schools. If you've got children, you need to consider, how are you going to be able to make the move work for them as well. So that is another consideration. You also want to think about how long do you want to move abroad for, because some countries will have restrictions. So there is typically a window of time when you can go to a country visa free. But again, you need to read the small print and you need to understand what the country's kind of restrictions are, because every country is different. After a period of time, then you are going to need a visa. So for example, in the Schengen area, often it's 90 days and then you need to apply for a visa. So if you're wanting to move abroad for a year, you need to think about how you're going to go about that process and whether you need to apply to the embassy and get a visa, for example. But if you're only wanting to hop about and maybe just stay in the UK and then sometimes do 3 weeks somewhere and then come back, that might look very different. And also you want to think about the accommodation and what accommodation you're looking for, because again, if you're going for 2 months, you may want to stay in an Airbnb, versus if you were going for 2 years, you probably want to get yourself a flat. So think about these considerations. Think about what you want in a new country. Like, what is it that you're after? Think about, are you moving alone? Are you moving with people? And what does that look like? Think about how long you want to go for, and think about the accommodation that you're looking for too. But I really, really do think that working abroad, it used to be a little bit of a dream, and I feel like it used to be done in a very traditional format. So it used to be done in a format whereby you kind of just transfer office, and that was the main way of doing it. But I now think there are more people experimenting. More and more countries are also rolling out digital nomad visas. Portugal, Costa Rica, great examples, because I really think it's such an exciting time. And it's also why I've taken this sabbatical at this moment in time after the pandemic, because I really do think that the world of work is being restructured in ways, and I think that's so exciting. So I think a lot of countries are also getting behind this. And as I say, it's not easy to do. It takes research, it takes time, particularly if you have responsibilities or commitments here that prevent you doing it. But hey, moving abroad doesn't necessarily mean moving permanently. Part of it could be splitting your time. For example, staying in the UK for a bit, living abroad for a bit. Or, there's so many options. The key is just making sure you do your research, you do it right, you check the kind of restrictions, whether it's with a company that you're with or within the countries that you're going to. But I really think it's a hugely exciting opportunity. And with that in mind, in the next video, I'm going to be talking to you about my own move abroad. So currently I'm more within the third category I mentioned, so working on some of my own projects and moving around a little bit. And I'm going to be talking to you around the reality of what moving abroad is like. And I don't really know what to say because I'm currently in my London flat, and the next time I record a video I will be in another country, which is so exciting. But I want to share with you what the reality of moving abroad is like and how you really go about integrating yourself within a new country as well, what it's like when you're going on your own, all of that. So I really hope that I can give you a personal perspective, but also one that may be helpful if you're ever thinking of doing this too. So that is all from me. If I've kept going like this, by the way, in this video, it's because I have my headphones in for better sound quality. But thank you so much for joining, and I will see you here next time for the 4th episode where I will be talking about moving abroad. Thank you.